Hello all, and welcome to our latest APAC webinar, State of the Nations, What is the Labour Market Outlook for APAC in 2024? We appreciate you taking the time to be here, and we hope the information today provokes some thought and insight into the data we produce at Lightcast to illuminate the labour market and allow organisations like yours to navigate trends and make data-driven decisions in curriculum design, career services, marketing, workforce planning, and more. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar today, please put them in the questions chat box and we'll endeavour to answer them during the presentation. If not, we'll follow up directly with you after the webinar. We'll also be sharing the recording and slides for today in a follow-up email, so please keep your eyes open for that. Now, many of you will know who I am, but if you don't, my name's Ben van Tongeren. I am the Director of Customer Success for Lightcast here in APAC, and in my role I have the pleasure of looking after our education clients in the APAC region. Today I'll be playing a small part in the presentation of this webinar. However, we're incredibly privileged to have Elena Magrini, our Head of Global Research at Lightcast, with us to share her expertise and findings. Elena leads our team, our research team in Global, and that team covers the regions outside of North America. She spends a lot of her time on the speaking circuit at events and conventions in Europe and the UK, and we're lucky to have her here today to speak to some of the labour market trends in Australia, Singapore and New Zealand, and share her insights into the key developments in APAC from both a regional and country-specific viewpoint. Welcome, Elena. How are you?
Thanks, Ben, for the kind introduction. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, very well. Nice to have you here. Okay, let's move to our agenda. So today, in today's webinar, we're going to be looking at some of the economic factors at play in Australia, Singapore and New Zealand that impact the labour market. And we're going to look at some of the key industries, occupations and skills that are in demand. We can't look at every industry in one session, so we've chosen three key areas of focus for today in information technology, healthcare and construction. From there, I'll be handing over to Elena for her insights and findings, initially looking at recruitment trends across the three countries and observing industries and occupations in demand. Elena has kindly put some time into looking at all three countries' labour market data and prepared a deep dive into Singapore within the IT sector and Australia and New Zealand in the healthcare and construction industries. The labour markets in Singapore, Australia and New Zealand are certainly showing signs of pressure in comparison to 2023. Employment rates are dropping in all three countries in a 2023 to 2024 comparison. And at the same time, unemployment rates are also rising. The Australian Economic Outlook, published by KPMG, expands on this and forecasts into 2015, suggesting that Australia's employment rate is likely to continue declining in 2025, whilst New Zealand and Singapore may see some stability returning over the same period. Interestingly, annual GDP growth has also declined in Australia in the 2023 to 24 period, and whilst New Zealand and Singapore have both seen growth. KPMG are projecting GDP growth across all three countries in 2025. Let's have a quick look at some of the key trends in Australia. It's a tight labour market across the board, no doubt about it, but there are signs of unemployment decreasing on a monthly level. So in comparison to 2023 to 24, it is rising, but we are seeing trends on a monthly level to show that it might be declining. There's a clear need for employees, particularly skilled workers across many sectors, and moderate wage growth reflects that demand. So it shows that employers are experiencing a pressure to attract and retain good talent. Again, we've looked at some key sectors for this webinar, and we know that in Australia, for example, there are skill shortages clearly identified in those key areas, such as healthcare, IT, and construction. Construction skill demand is definitely being driven by major infrastructure projects across the country, such as the Sydney Metro, Victoria's Suburban Rail Loop, Western Sydney Airport, and many more. Healthcare and IT roles are in demand in all three countries. Australia is no exception, and we've highlighted a number of occupations in high demand here. Turning now to Singapore, where the labour market is slightly different in comparison. Again, facing rising unemployment, demand for certain occupations and skills are increasing. However, in Singapore, there's a more significant focus on technology and green skills. Driven by projects such as the Smart Nation initiative, Singapore continues to focus on investment in technology and science, with exciting plans for developing smart city initiatives. There's also continued demand for construction skills with a focus on affordable housing and infrastructure projects such as the ACC1 fibre optic cable system, which is connecting Singapore, Indonesia, Australia, Japan, and the US, power plants, and the Tembusu Grand Residential Development. We also see similar patterns in healthcare, with high demand for many specialist roles across the sector. New Zealand and Australia have similar stories to tell. It's often the way, and again here within their labour market, where we see the growth in unemployment related to a competitive labour market, and employers reflecting this in general with moderate wage increases, again designed to attract and retain good talent. Again, we see familiar demand signals in key industries such as healthcare, IT, and construction, with higher demand for healthcare specialists, particularly in rural areas, and construction again driven by key infrastructure projects such as the City Rail link and East West link in Auckland. Having looked at some of the economic factors in play, it's now my pleasure to hand over to Elena to talk you through her findings in her research in APAC and discuss some of the key recruitment trends and sector deep dives. Over to you, Elena.
Thank you, Ben. So what I wanted to do with this section was to try and look a little bit deeper behind these official statistics, this picture that Ben showed us in terms of the latest trends in the key countries in the APAC region, and complement the insights from official statistics with some of the insights and the trends that we are seeing using Lightcast data, mostly on job postings data in the different countries. So I thought I'd start with some of the recruitment trends over the past 3 years. So we've heard Ben saying that the labor market is tight in pretty much all the 3 regions, but that there are signs that things may be changing and the unemployment may be growing. So this is a different way to look at this. And in particular, it looks at the share of the number of job postings over time in the 3 countries and how this has changed compared to 2021. So how this has changed in the past 3 years. And what we are seeing here is that compared to Q3 in 2021, the labor market, especially for Singapore, saw a very strong rise in job postings over 2022. And to some extent, also, we saw similar patterns for Australia and New Zealand, which then continue on to 23. But then gradually from the second half of 2023 onwards, we've seen a slightly cooling in the labor market in all the 3 countries. And in the case of New Zealand and Singapore, the number of job postings available at any given point in the labor market is now below the point that it was in Q3 2021. So this doesn't mean there isn't demand. It just means the demand is cooling compared to how it was 3 years ago, which goes hand in hand with some of the signs that Ben was showing us in terms of changes in unemployment figures. But while this is the overall trend, and the question is, okay, but where are we seeing demand in the labor market? What kind of jobs are currently still being recruited for in the different countries? Are these the same or are they different? And so the next thing I looked at was trying to understand how is recruitment activity distributed by different career areas, or you can also call them industries, basically broad sectors of the economy, to try and understand where is currently demand the highest, and so where does investment needs to go, where does talent need to go in order to fill the needs of current businesses. And so what you see here in this chart, it's the distribution of recruitment activity in the 3 different markets by different industries. It's a heat map. So what you see is that where the color is darker, it means there is higher demand, and where the color is lighter, so there's lighter purple color there, there's lower demand comparatively. And there's a couple of points that I'd like to draw your attention here in terms of where demand is highest. First, there are some similarities between the three different markets. Again, as Ben highlighted, the three countries are different but also similar in many ways. And one of the areas that we see a lot of similarities is around business-related roles, both in terms of business management and operation and sales-related roles. We see a lot of demand for this type of roles right across the three regions. But beyond that, we also see a number of differences. So if we take a look at Australia, for example, some of the sectors that currently have the highest recruitment demand include healthcare, include education and training, as well as hospitality, and also to some extent IT and computer science. For New Zealand, picture is quite similar to Australia, although with some differences. We see a very high demand for healthcare, if something even higher than in Australia. And same for hospitality, food and tourism. Again, we see a lot of demand, even more than in Australia. Another area that New Zealand has a lot of demand, and again, even more than the case of Australia, is construction. And then New Zealand also has demand for IT and computer science in the same way as Australia has it. But then instead, if we look at Singapore, we see a picture that is quite significantly different compared to the other two regions. Beyond the business-related roles that I was mentioning at the beginning, IT and computer science definitely takes a large number of job postings for the region, highlighting the important role that this sector plays in the country's labor market. Finance also plays quite a big role in terms of current recruitment activity, as well as other highly professional roles related to engineering, as well as marketing and public relations. So there is demand in all the different labor markets, but there are some differences in terms of the type of roles that are being sought after in the three countries. And this gives us a picture of the career areas that are most sought after. But a question that comes naturally, at least to me, is, but what are the specific roles? What roles are we talking about? Because business management and operation is a big category, healthcare is a big category, but what are the specific roles that we are talking about? And so here we've plotted the top 10 most in-demand occupations in each of the three countries. And these are basically the occupations that account for the largest share of job postings in each of the three markets. The shares look small because there are obviously many occupations that can be recruited in a given labor market. The point here is to show the ranking. So what are the ones that are most sought after? And again, here we see some similarities and some differences from one country to another. In Australia, we see that a lot of the roles recruited for are a mix of retail roles as well as a lot of healthcare-related roles, such as registered nurses, physicians, and caregivers. In New Zealand, labor and warehouse workers is actually the most in-demand occupation, and again is followed by a mix of healthcare-related roles and retail-related roles. So in this case, registered nurses is the second most recruited occupation in the country. But then we also see a number of other roles related to administration, customer service, and sales. And then again, the third country, we're looking at Singapore now, again, a different picture. And here we see again something that we were mentioning in the previous slide, which is around the important role that IT and the sector of computer science more in general plays in the country economy. And we see that reflected in the top 10 occupations, which includes, for example, software developers and engineers, and as well as a number of other professional occupations related to business development, project management, as well as marketing and accounting. So again, the finance that we were mentioning before. So each of the three has different labor market and different needs in terms of the occupations that are currently most recruited for. From here, as Ben mentioned, we are going to, what I've tried to do was to do a little bit of a deep dive in some of the key sectors that are currently most recruited for in the different countries, to go a little bit deeper into these insights. And the idea behind this is that while it is all very well and good to know what are the occupations that are most in demand and most recruited for, then knowing that actually sparks a number of other questions, such as, okay, but what are the specific roles within a sector? What are the skills needs of these sectors? And how are other trends affecting a given sector? So we try to answer some of these questions for the IT sector in Singapore, and then for healthcare and construction in Australia and New Zealand. I'm going to start with the IT sector in Singapore first. And the first question that I've tried to answer here was what IT jobs are needed. So we are saying that the IT sector and computer science accounts for one of the biggest shares of all recruitment activity in the country. But what roles are we talking about? And here it's a range of roles. We have software developers and engineers, which is by far the largest occupation currently most needed or most advertised in the country in terms of recruitment activity. But it isn't the only one. And actually what we see is a range of roles, both in terms of the technical expertise needed, but also the level of complexity and also the role and interaction with other parts of, for example, clients or internal facing roles. So the second most recruited for occupation is computer support specialist. And then we also see high demand for IT managers and directors. So as you see here, it's not just technical and analytical position. There's also the managerial side of the IT industry that is currently recruited for. Project managers also play a really important role here. And then we see a number of other technical occupation and engineering related occupations, such as computer system engineers, network engineers. And we also see demand for cyber and information securities engineers, which is an area that we see at the global level as a fast and rising area of demand in terms of demand for recruitment by companies. Then the question I have when I see something like this is, and especially if I think about it from an education provision perspective, is okay, but what kind of skills do these workers need? How can I prepare my students and the future workforce for this type of roles, so to be successful, so that I can meet business demand? And so what you see here is what I call a skill framework for the IT sector in Singapore. And what this actually shows you is the skills that are currently most frequently cited by employers recruiting in the IT sector in Singapore over the past 12 months. And with the last 12 months, I mean from the beginning of Q3 in 2023 to the end of Q2 2024. So up until the end of June this year. And what you see here is that obviously, skills related to information technology are really important for the sector. We are in the IT sector, they need IT skills. This kind of makes sense, but it also shows you here what are the specific IT skills that are most often cited by employers. And beyond the general umbrella of information technology, employers often mention skills related to computer science, automation, software engineering, and also specific programming languages such as Python and SQL, as well as agile methodology, which is a really important project management skill within the IT sector, as well as other tools like Amazon Web Services. The thing that I'd like to highlight here, though, is that it is not just information technology, so it's not just IT skills that are needed to succeed in this type of roles. But what we actually see is that a lot of employers mention also another range of skills, which we can call foundational skills, common skills, or soft skills, depending on a bit the language that you use in different environments. What it means in practice is that workers need skills related to communication, especially interpersonal communication. They need business-related skills around management, project management, and operations, as well as more wider skills around, for example, critical thinking and problem solving, which is an essential skill for working in the IT sector. And actually, if we look at the frequency with which some of these skills are mentioned, some of these foundational skills actually appear even more often than the specific IT skills in the sector. So take communication. 41% of all IT jobs in Singapore in the last year mentioned communication as a critical skill. Information technology, which is the most frequently mentioned IT skills, is mentioned in 40% of job postings. So it is not just IT skills. This role needs more than that, and it's important that workers are equipped with a wide range of skills that help them succeed in this type of jobs. So that's the overview of the IT sector in Singapore. I'm going to move on to the one last thing on the IT sector for Singapore, which is a little bit of a niche, but it's a fast-rising niche that we often hear talking about in the context of the global labor market, and especially in the last few months with the rise of ChatGPT and other generative AI tool, which is the impact of artificial intelligence on the labor market. So what you see here, what this chart shows you, is the type of AI-related skills that are most mentioned in IT-related jobs in Singapore. And actually, 4% of jobs in the Singaporean labor market as a whole, so not just IT jobs, but all jobs in the Singapore labor market, mention AI-related skills now. And we know that this demand for AI skills is growing very fast, almost exponentially in the labor market. And then the other thing that we looked into was the type of roles that actually need AI skills. And we see that a lot of the roles that require IT skills, AI skills the most, are data scientists and data engineers. But we are starting to see demand for AI skills also beyond IT-related jobs. And for example, we're starting to see AI content writers or AI marketing specialists in terms of roles that require AI. So artificial intelligence related skills can still be considered as part of the IT sector, but we're also seeing them enhancing jobs beyond the IT sector. So that gives you a picture of also of one of the fastest rising trends in the labor market right now. Moving on to the second deep dive that we've looked into, that's for the healthcare sector. Now, the situation here is a little bit different, as Ben alluded to. There are demographic pressures, there are skill shortages, and there is a need for workers to fill in jobs related to the healthcare sector. And so, again, here, the first question I've tried to look into was, okay, but what type of healthcare jobs are there and are most needed in the labor market of Australia and New Zealand? And again, here you have a heat map that shows you broadly how demand for healthcare jobs is split in the two countries. The darker the color, the highest the demand. The key takeaway here is that nursing roles are very high in demand at the moment in both countries. In fact, 23%, so that's almost 1 in 4 jobs recruited for in the healthcare sector in New Zealand is for registered and practical nurses. In Australia, this occupation group is also the one that accounts for the largest share of job postings within healthcare, although the share is a little bit lower, it's 18%. But still, nursing is in high demand. And beyond nursing, we also see a number of different roles being in demand. A lot of these roles are technicians as well as specialists and therapists of different categories, like physicians, like advanced healthcare therapists. But there are also roles related to administration and management within healthcare that are being needed. So there is a combination of both. And we see that with, for example, healthcare administrator and managers being the third most recruited for occupation group in Australia, and actually the second most recruited for occupation group in New Zealand. Okay, one of the questions that we often get asked is also not just about what are the roles that are most in demand at a given moment, but also which are the roles that are growing the fastest. And so here what you see are the top 5 fastest growing roles within the healthcare sector in Australia and in New Zealand. From the Australia point of view, we see dentist, occupational therapist, clinical auditor, nurse anesthetist, and behavioral analyst as the 5 occupations for which the number of job postings grew the most in between 2022-2023, the 12 months from Q3 2022 to Q2 2023, to the same 12 months to the past 12 months, so Q3 2023 to Q1 2024. A bit complicated to use quarters in terms of explaining the past 12 months, but you get what I'm saying. And then in terms of a similar picture for New Zealand, what we're seeing here is that nursing assistants, medical directors, patient service representatives, nurse practitioners, and radiologic technicians were the occupations that have been growing the fastest. Now, beyond the fact that it's helpful to know what these roles are, the other thing that you draw your attention here is that the two countries have actually very different pictures in terms of what are the fastest growing roles. And this again highlights the importance of drilling down into the data to the details in order to actually understand the nuances and the specific needs of a given labor market rather than looking at it on the overall. And then lastly, for the healthcare sector, similar questions to what we were trying to answer before for IT in Singapore. What are the skills that are most needed, currently most mentioned by employers when recruiting for healthcare related roles? And here you see the top 10 common skills being most frequently mentioned by employers: specialized skills and digital skills. Common skills, again, this is the group of skills that could also be referred to as foundational skills or soft skills. The main thing to draw here is that, again, these skills are really important, and most often than not, they are actually more frequently cited by employers than other specialized skills. Now, there is a bit of a difference in terms of healthcare sector compared to other sectors, in the sense that for many healthcare roles, you kind of need a specific education pathways and a qualification to enter these roles, and therefore the qualification implicitly carry some information about the type of technical skills that you have. But it is really important to see here how employers again highlight the importance of communication, management, and leadership. And it's also interesting to see the type of specialized skills that are being required, especially around nursing in general, as it is the area that is most needed in both countries, but also other skills like working with children and mental health as well. And then lastly, the other thing that's worth highlighting here is that you see up to top 10 digital skills, and you don't even see 10 in this graph, of the digital skills that are being most requested in the sector. And what we see here is that healthcare related jobs do require some digital skills, especially around the more basic computer literacy related skills, so around using, for example, the Microsoft Office suite. But beyond that, the level of digital skills that are required in this sector is quite different from other sectors, and mostly around operational related digital skills, for example, around managing administrative systems and managing patients' information. So there is some demand of digital requirements in this sector, but it is very different from what we see in other parts of the labor market. And here we see mostly demand on common skills and specialized skills. And then lastly, for our third deep dive, we've looked into the construction sector, for which, as Ben alluded to, there is a strong demand, especially in New Zealand, and also related to the need for building new and more homes in the different labor markets. And again, here we start by trying to look at what are the type of roles that are currently most needed, most demanded by employers when recruiting within the construction sector. Approximately half, a little bit less, 40% in Australia, 45% in New Zealand of the roles most recruited for are related to construction workers. And then another third, more or less, 29% in Australia and 28% in New Zealand, are related to the skills, construction, and building trades. So more, the slightly different roles. And then the other quarter or third, depending on the country, is around the managerial roles within construction, and then approximately 1% are related to architecture. So this is the composition of the type of jobs that are being currently recruited the most. Now, one of the things that is really changing the conversation within the construction sector and also in other sectors, so it's not only about the construction sector, but it is the shift to a greener economy and green transition. And obviously, the construction sector plays a big role here because a lot of the jobs are changing in order to ensure that they're becoming more sustainable. And we want houses that are retrofitted, that have good insulation, and they can keep the energy in a way that is much more efficient. And so what we did was we tried to look at the type of jobs within the construction sector that were mentioning any green-related skills. And with green-related skills here, I mean a list of over 400 skills that we have within our Lightcast taxonomy that are specifically related to the environment. They may be related to the environment because we are talking about green architecture, or we are talking about retrofitting, but also they could be related to the environment because they touch upon conservation or renewable energy, or other related energy management skills to improve the efficiency of the energy systems. And what we see is that approximately 5% of all construction jobs in Australia mention at least one of these green skills, and 4% of jobs in New Zealand require one of these skills. And then in particular, when we look at the specific top occupations requiring green skills in the two different countries, we see that a lot of the roles are actually the same here. We see that the occupations that require most of the green skills are construction managers, construction helpers, electricians, operating engineers. And so we see that some specific roles within the construction sector are increasingly requiring green skills. So the roles are the same as they used to be, but the skills that are being required in these roles are changing and are adapting to the changing requirements brought forward by government pledges around green transition, reducing the carbon footprint, and so on and so forth. And so then the last question here that we looked at was, okay, but what are the green skills that are being sought after in the construction sector? And here it is a mix. A lot of the skills that are mentioned are around renewable energy and different type of renewable energy. But a lot of the skills mentioned are also related to environmental resource management as well as environmental laws. So knowing the environmental policy space and law and regulation space, as well as skills around waste management. About how to deal with waste and how to ensure that this is done sustainably. So these are the most sought after green skills in the construction sector. And that's it in terms of the deep dive and the recruitment trends. I'm going to pause here for a second before going into my last slide in case you, Ben, have any reflection, comments, or anything you want to draw your attention, the audience attention to.
Oh, look, I found that fascinating. Thank you. Believe it or not, we haven't rehearsed this. This is the first time I've seen Elena's findings. So yeah, there are a couple of things in there that resonated, I guess. I think one thing that's really interesting and not unknown, but nice to sort of see reaffirmed was that sort of yin and yang of technical versus non-technical in terms of occupations and skills. So technical roles requiring common skills, communication, teamwork, project management, that sort of thing, but also the flip side of the non-technical roles still requiring those technical skills. And of course, we're seeing a lot of the Microsoft suite coming through there and probably software related to that particular sector as well. So that was fantastic. I loved your chart for the Singapore skills, the AI related skills. I'm going to have to steal that one, Elena. I thought that was really interesting, but also just a very good way of depicting it. I thought from there, it's going to be really interesting to see the future pathway for AI. And obviously it's a buzzword. It's still relatively new to us. It's still embedding in occupations and even in our personal lives. But it will be interesting to see, how that skill family grows and starts to branch out, but also how it starts to make its way into occupations that maybe we're not expecting it to. So fascinating stuff to think about as well. I think this is to me, this sort of feels like a part one. This is our starting point. It would be really interesting to come back and look in a year's time or a couple of years' time, or depending on how rapidly these changes happen, maybe even sooner. Green skills obviously being another one as well. Fascinating to see it coming through in those different occupations and sectors and construction. It does make sense, but it'll be interesting to see again how much that grows. 4%, 5% doesn't seem like a huge amount, but I guess it probably is when we look at comparison to a couple of years ago. Will it reach double figures in the next couple of years? I guess that'll be interesting to see as well. So fascinating. Thank you. I'll let you continue on.
And it's quite funny because we did not prep this, but it's a nice segue into the next slide that I wanted to show because this all brings it together for me. And I'm like thinking, okay, but so what? Why would you care about these things? And the main point here is the labor market is changing really rapidly. And actually, yes, tracking change over time and see how these things evolve is going to be a very interesting and fascinating area, and things may look very different in a year time. And that, yes, right, 4 or 5%, they seem very small, but they have come a long way in the last few years. And so even if 5 and 4% look like small number, there are there are big numbers of jobs that are behind those numbers, and if the growth pace will continue in a similar way, that clearly highlights the need of reskilling and retraining and training the new workforce into a whole bunch of new skills that weren't there a few years ago. So it's a really important area to continue to monitor. And actually, the good thing is that we have data that can help us monitor these changes in a way that we simply didn't have 10 years ago, for example. And I think that's really important because it is quite a complex world, the one we're living in, not just because the changes are very rapid, but also because these changes are affecting different parts of the labor market in very different ways. So it's super important to understand the macro trends, the overarching trends, but also when it comes to creating actionable change, when it comes to training students for the future, when it comes to developing economic strategies for the future, you also need to drill down into the specific details. And so being able to use data to have the zoom out picture, but also to zoom in on the specific requirements of different sectors and occupations is critical to understand how the world of work is evolving. And one thing that at Lightcast we strongly believe in, and I definitely fully embrace that as an economist working in this space, actually using skills as a way to describe some of these changes in the labor market is very helpful in a couple of ways. First of all, it helps us track changes as soon as they appear. So oftentimes when we see a new trend happening in the labor market, it comes about first as a new skills. So the job may be the same as it was before, but one of the tasks of the jobs has changed and it requires a new additional skills. And so being able to talk about skills, it helps us capture these trends as soon as they emerge. And then secondly, skills gives us language, give us a tool to translate what employers need into a language that education providers can use in the way they develop their offer. And so that is the glue that can bring together all the different stakeholders within the labor market landscape and in the ecosystem and help them all talk the same language to ensure that businesses have the workers they need to continue to grow and be productive. Regions have the workers and businesses they need in order to continue to thrive. And that people actually end up in good job that makes them happy and also earn them a good living. So that it all brings it together for me. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Ben again.
Thank you, Elena. Well, that was fascinating. Thank you. Look, there was some really interesting insights in there. I'm sure it'll be prompting some thoughts and ideas for the audience today. So, Elena, I appreciate your hard work and thanks again for coming to this webinar and partnering with me. Okay, so just to finish off, everybody, obviously big thanks. A couple of things we just wanted to draw your attention to before we finish. A couple of resources we thought might be valuable to you. So recently, you may be aware of this, you may not, but we've created this incredibly valuable resource, which is a web page that gives you access to our global research collaborations. We're lucky enough to partner with some of the best known and influential organizations globally who use our data to answer pressing labor market questions. So you'll find research papers from think tanks, research institutes, academics, intergovernmental organizations on a range of topics. It's really interesting stuff. We've partnered with people like the OECD, UNESCO, MIT, Stanford University, World Bank. So there's some really good quality stuff in there and it's free to access. So go and check that out. Also, some of you may also be aware that we recently released the Lightcast Digital Skills Outlook for 2024. The aim here was to illuminate digital skill trends across labour markets. Again, it's a web page. You can go and check this out, where we look at in-demand, growing and emerging skills, digital skills, specifically across 15 countries, and that does include Australia, New Zealand and Singapore. And then we provide insights into city hotspots as well, and look at 5 key occupations in the digital space. absolutely worth checking out. Thoroughly recommend you go and have a look at that if you haven't already. And if you'd like a free digital report even for your region or city, you can request that on the site as well, which is incredible. That's all. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. I also, again, like to give my sincere thanks to Elena for taking the time to be here and give us her valuable insights. And just to reiterate, we'll be sending the deck out today as well, and a link to the recording of the webinar, so look out for that in your inbox. If you have any questions or we haven't been able to get to them today, as I said, we'll follow up with you offline. But don't be afraid to get in touch with anyone in the APAC team. So Daniel, myself, or Devor, our contact details there, and will be in the slide deck provided. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again for being here with us. Have a great day.